Welcome back to This is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander, tough rules, and cool interactions, episode 37. Today's episode is going to follow up with a couple of things expanding upon the previous episode. As I frequently have mentioned in replies and such, this game is ridiculously complex, and it's nearly impossible for me to think of all the weird interactions that could happen with these cards, let alone have enough time to include these in each video. After reading through the comments, I figured I'd mention these few things to expand upon the previous episode that covered Cultivator Colossus and Ancient Greenwarden. So let's dive into this nice and quick. If you controlled a Ancient Greenwarden and then you were to play your Cultivator Colossus, as you resolve your Colossus's ETB ability, you would not be able to play lands from your graveyard via the static ability granted by your Greenwarden that says you may play lands from your graveyard. Because the ability on the Colossus specifically says that you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. It is also worth noting here that in Magic, playing a land is different than putting a land into play. If your opponent has out a burgeoning while you resolve your Colossus's ability, they would not get triggers from their burgeoning for each land that you put into play. The next two things are specific to the Ancient Greenwarden, which is just such a wild card. First off, its first static ability lets us play lands from our graveyard, and this means that if you have a Bala Ged Recovery in your graveyard, which is an MDFC or modal double face card, then you could actually play that on the backside of Bala Ged Sanctuary as your land for turn. Very handy to keep in mind if you've been milling things away and you may not think that you have any lands in your graveyard. Next thing to note about the Greenwarden is in regards to its second static ability, which says if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Clearly, people will use this to double up a lot of their landfall triggers of permanents that they control, like the AC Tyrant of Gyre Strait that was mentioned in the previous episode, but it will also affect the lands themselves as they enter the battlefield. Sadly, this includes the bounce lands, like Golgari Rot Farm, and so you would now need to return 2 lands to your hand. For some decks, though, this may actually be a benefit, as you now will have more lands to play from your hand, but more often than not, this might just end up hurting you more than helping you. And before I close out this episode, I just want to clarify that the Greenwarden does not interact with replacement effects on lands that you play. If you play your Blast Zone, it does not have a triggered ability. It has a replacement effect for how it enters the battlefield. Similarly, a card like Dark Depths would not now also enter the battlefield with 20 ice counters. Instead, it would still enter with 10, as this is not a triggered ability that the Greenwarden would be able to see. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you at least found this video to be entertaining, and I hope that a few of you may have even learned something about these crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta.